What's up, everybody? Welcome into the latest episode of the Blitz Network Radio. With you here is Robert Zaglitzky, editor-in-chief of TBN, and your host. And I'm pleased to be joined by my main man, Brad Spielberger, who is our lead cap analyst, free agency analyst, numbers analyst, and nerd that can't properly navigate an Excel sheet, which is the most contradictory thing that I think I've heard of in a long time. Brad, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I welcome all titles. Bring on the hate. I appreciate it. I know how to navigate an Excel sheet. I just don't know what Excel sheet I'm using. That's all it is.
Oh, right. Okay, so a numbers nerd that isn't organized and can't like properly or can't properly organize his data. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That sounds like the ideal. That sounds like the ideal.
Yeah, it's a bit of a roadblock. I think it's hilarious. I'm like the resident old guy. I get made fun of for not knowing technology at a ripe age of 24 years old. So I find that pretty funny.
It's all love, Brad. It's all love. Let's jump right into it, my friend, and let's talk. I broached this to you a little bit earlier, and I even wrote about it today, but I wanted to get your sense of like whether a more quiet off season is good for the Bears. And when I say quiet, I mean, Ryan Pace is typically someone that at this point we understand, Bears GM Ryan Pace, that where he's not going to let loose any of his plans. He's going to keep it quiet anyway. But I mean more in like, hey, the Bears don't have to make this big splash. Hey, the Bears don't have to be one of the teams that's a rumored suitor for, Earl Thomas, Le'Veon Bell, if you want to play Madden franchise mode. Like, it is quiet better? Is even more hushed better?
So, first off, I think that the interesting situation here with the Bears is that they, for the first time since Pace has gotten the GM job, they don't have to be big spenders in free agency, right? And, even in the beginning, which I try to give him credit for, he kind of recognized the roster was a couple years away. So while he was signing some bigger names, the Quentin Dempsey's, the Pernell McPhee's, he was keeping those contracts short, and he still clearly wasn't making those splash signings. Of course, last year you had the huge offseason, Robinson, Burton, eventually Mack in the trade and all of that. And so, while I would say we're not going to see anything like that this offseason, first, is it better? I would say yes, because it's probably indicative that your team was pretty good the year before. So it's better in that sense. But I think that the key difference will be that from a, like you mentioned, Madden franchise mode perspective, it'll be quote unquote quieter. But I just wrote a piece today for the Blitznet talking about some key acquisitions they could make that, aren't going to be your starters or aren't going to be your best players, but are those guys that could put you over the edge. Those signings you don't hear about, that aren't talked about as much in the media, but that could make those crucial differences, those kind of marginal guys. So I think that's going to be, it's quiet in a sense of we're not going to have the top of the line guys, but it should be loud in the results next year.
Yeah, and I almost feel as if like it's because they really have the difference makers in. I mean, most teams, some even spend years trying to find an all-worldly defensive talent that can take over games by himself. And the Bears have Khalil Mack. Well, largely thanks to the services of John Gruden, but, they have him. They have a guy that not only takes over games by himself, but lifts everybody else. They have most teams spend years looking for a young quarterback. So I'll never get one, or one you can build around anyway. And while, there might still be some criticisms in areas that where Mitchell Trubisky has to work on in his game, like he's certainly a guy that looks like can play in Chicago for 10 years. He's certainly a guy where at minimum at this point, if you give him ideal circumstances and you give him a good situation, you can win a championship with him, which is what you ask out of a guy that's an offensive signal caller. Like they have the pieces, the big parts that they have to worry about, kind of like you alluded to, like they don't have to worry about them, and everything else it's some minor tinkering. You don't have to rest on your laurels, but the big parts, like the big concerns, they're all behind. That's all behind them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the key one, obviously, Khalil Mack, I think that coming into this offseason, let's say a year ago before the Mack trade, Ryan Pace probably thought he was going to be attacking that edge position this offseason. Last year it wasn't a great free agency for edge rushers. And this offseason you have DeMarcus Lawrence, you have D Ford, you have even that kind of second tier like Ladarius Smith from the Ravens, you have Preston Smith from the Redskins, excuse me. So I think he probably was looking to this offseason for that, and now he doesn't have to anymore. And I think that one thing we talk about a lot, because I'm kind of a nerd, as I am in many ways, but one thing I'm a big nerd about is the compensatory picks. And the downside to signing free agents is that that's what goes into your compensatory pick formula. So every big name guy you sign is one guy that counts against you. So every big name guy you lose, you cannot get a pick for it. So seeing as the Bears might be losing, a Bryce Callahan or an Adrian Amos, we'll see. One of those two guys will be landing them a third or fourth round compensatory pick if they don't bring in a free agent, that's a higher paid guy. So that's a consideration that he has to have now.
But Brad, should they sign Earl Thomas? Do you see them going after Earl Thomas?
Only if Landon Collins turns down their initial offer, and then they could try to get Honey Badger and Earl Thomas as a package deal, I think.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks for looking out, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I look at it as a point of progress. Like most teams spend years trying to get to this point. I've trying to make any stories out about the Bears right now, like manufacturing takes, like I've seen in the past few days, like on NFL Network, like, oh, hey, Antonio Brown's a Bears destination spot. Like, no, he isn't. You just have nothing to talk about, and so you're gonna do that, and then people are gonna grab and run with that, and then and think it's a thing. Like, there's the fact that there's no real like meaningful stories to talk about with the Bears at the moment, besides the fact that there's no meaningful stories to talk about, is a story that's is the only story that matters, because they're one of the rare teams that has everything set in place and can comfortably head into September with championship aspirations. Like trying to throw any other hot take in the mold of a Fox Sports 1 or some kind of generic daytime sports programming that you can put on in the background, well, it makes little sense, and to me, there's little point in paying attention to it. But because, yeah,
100%. And I think that the reason that gets amplified is the offseason the past 5 years for the Bears fans has kind of been the regular season. I mean, that's kind of been where the dramas come in. Who are we going to draft top 10 for the last 5 years in a row? Who are we going to sign of the marquee free agents the last 5 years in a row? So now we have no draft content because we're not even picking till the third round. And there, like you said, there aren't a whole lot of needs. To the Antonio Brown piece, with all due respect to Reggie Wayne, legendary wide receiver, I don't think he's a cap expert. So, of course, not only was he on that list of potential destinations, he was first. The Bears. The Bears were first on the list of where he should land, which is not going to happen. Sorry, listeners. But you got to, like you said, you got to come up with content, I guess.
Let's move on, Brad. And before we get into a little bit of a combine preview with that starting up next week, your thoughts on the Deion Sims release, who, mind you, who just had his birthday on Monday. Happy birthday to Deion Sims. You're out of an NFL job. Happy birthday, buddy. Good job, Bears. That's great optics. Your thoughts on that move today? I don't believe the Bears made it official, but you got the scoop trader, Ian Rappaport, getting that information out there. It's basically a done deal.
Yeah, I think that was a foregone conclusion. I'm pretty sure I put that in every article I've written about cap space. I basically just added $6 million and said, quote, when they cut Deion Sims. So now it's official. I think that it's another Pace signing that unfortunately didn't work out, but as we talked about earlier in the day, concussions were a problem for him. I'm not rooting against the guy as a person. It seems like he was a great guy in the locker room and all that. It just didn't work out as a football fit. But I think we saw that one coming.
Did the Bears, because I didn't look at the exact numbers did they really double their cap space? I mean, they didn't have much cap space to begin with before the move, but they did. I think it's more of roughly 14 million, correct?
So yeah, they had
You're the nerd
yes.
number.
I'm the nerd number guy. Yeah, no, they had about
Oh,
7.3 coming in, and they free up 6 with his release. So yeah, they pretty much doubled their cap space by getting rid of Deion Sims.
okay. How do you see them perhaps playing this in with Adrian Amos and Bryce Callahan, either or both? I imagine that's something that one of those two guys is going to get a good portion of that.
So I think I've been maybe almost too aggressive in just completely assuming it's going to be one or the other. There is a way to make both fit. I still do think they're going to ultimately have to choose between the two. Not just because you're looking at 2019 cap space or whatever, but also just because, a smart team building for the future doesn't have to pay every single free agent on their roster, right? Amos, it's looking like his market is about 8 to 10 million now. It's a deep safety class, even at specifically, strong safety with Collins leading the way. You have Tyrann Mathieu, you have a lot of other guys that in that area. And the cornerback market is the opposite. It's a pretty weak cornerback market. Obviously, Callahan's particularly a slot cornerback, but his value is getting driven up because there aren't much of either. I think that, I think that once you add in the Sam Acho probable release, so let's say we're at the 16-17 mark. I think one of those guys takes about half of that. I would prefer for it to be Bryce Callahan. I think that slot corner is going to be a much harder to fill than strong safety. I would hope they could get him a deal around $7 million a year. He is a special talent, but he's never played a full season. He's an undrafted free agent. He's been a Bear his whole career, and yeah, there are some limitations to his game. Whereas with Amos, again, a solid player. On the other side, he's basically never missed a snap. He's an extremely reliable guy, but he just doesn't do something that other guys can't do. I think that, all credit to him. I honestly think he may have been one of the worst starters on the defense last year. Of course, it was the best defense in the NFL. But I think you can make an argument he was the 11th starter on the defense. So that's my thoughts.
Back to Sims. It was always so weird to me, and I don't want to belabor this point too much because, I mean, he's released, he's gone now, but it was always so weird to me that they kept him around for another season. They had, I believe, by the time it was the deadline to release him before the money became locked in for 2018, they had by that point already signed Trey Burton. They already had Adam Shaheen in the fold, and now you were paying a third tight end that can't block and can't catch and has concussion issues, which again, like you said, I hope he's going to be okay. And he's going to find potentially, make the potential right decision to retire. $6 million as a third tight end, like that made so little sense to me. It's not as if last year, it's not as if the Bears were necessarily cap strapped. And it's not a big deal. But it just made little sense from a general manager in a front office that to me is normally so much more shrewd, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. Like I mentioned, I was, so saying it was a foregone conclusion he was gone. I almost felt the same way last year. And like you said, he stuck around. My only guess would be that they still just didn't feel as though they knew what they had with Shaheen. And Sims, they figure out we'll give him a second year. We'll see what we can get out of him. And I'm just guessing that there's a good camaraderie in that tight end room. From people I've talked to with the Bears, Zach Miller is the most liked guy in the entire building. And I'm guessing, Deion Sims was another guy that was just, fit in with everyone and maybe was helping, Shaheen learn the NFL game, coming out of an FCF school like Alcorn State. There's, tight end is an underrated position where there's a lot to learn. Especially when you're playing, the position that Shaheen plays, which on the inside, so you're run blocking and chipping, defensive ends and all of that. So that's my only guess. But yeah, I'm with you.
At any rate, our long national nightmare is over. Let's move to the combine, Brad, and everyone's favorite time of year, the underwear Olympics, where normally great, otherwise blue chip college football prospects that have amazing tape and have displayed all of the traits that will make them successful at the next level. But oh, hey, their arm measured less than a half inch shorter than normal. Oh, hey, they 0.2 seconds. Their 40 was 0.2 seconds, 0.22 seconds too small. Now they should fall out of the first round. Otherwise known as my favorite way to evaluate prospects and certainly put a team in a position to success. Brad, if you're the Bears, with knowing you have most of your roster in place, knowing you're in a contending position, knowing you only have a few needs like kicker, running back, potentially safety. I don't even know how you would realistically scout a kicker other than the fact like that he's making his kicks. Like how does a 40 factor in for a kicker at the combine? But I digress. Or safety, nickelback, whatever. How do you approach the Underwear Olympics this year if you're the Bears?
So I think the Bears historically approached the Underwear Olympics. I think Pace, when he came in, was a big, athletic traits guy. We saw with the Kevin White pick and the Leonard Floyd pick, going for that upside. This guy's a freak athlete. He's either fast for his size or strong for his size, has the burst, whatever. And I think that, whether it had to do with the lack of success early on from Kevin White and a little bit Leonard Floyd, I apologize for saying that in your presence.
Brad.
I think we saw with the Roquan
Brad.
Smith pick. I think we saw with the Roquan Smith pick that he understands, yes, we want great athletes, but they also need to know how to play football. And Roquan Smith, we can go all day talking about him. The guy knows how to play football. That was apparent, at Georgia. So, I don't know what the Bears look for measurables. From what I understand, every team has their own, certain things they care a lot about. I know the Saints down here in New Orleans, they're huge on if a cornerback is not 5'11", like we won't even look at him, like he's not even on our board. There's a lot of random things like that teams care about. If I'm the Bears, I'm looking for guys that can contribute day one. They said they're in win now mode. We've taken a lot of project type picks. Some have worked out, some haven't. I'm looking for guys that can make an impact starting in 2019.
You are listening to the Blitz Network Radio. Follow us on Twitter at the BlitzNet. Here with you is myself, Robert Zaglinski. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski, and my favorite math nerd, Brad Spielberger. You can follow me on Twitter at BradOTC. Funny you should say that you don't know what the Bears' athletic thresholds are, Brad. I do. I did a draft board last year where I have all the measurables where I can basically reference that and update as is every single season now because I know exactly what Ryan Pace likes.
Interesting.
As long as he never gets fired, of course, I have him locked down. I am so for as far as the running back, the athletic threshold for the Bears is a 4.5140 minimum and a 7.223 cone. There's enough of a sample size with Jeremy Langford, Tariq Cohen, Jordan Howard, Benny Cunningham, and Jacquizz Rodgers. So I'm factoring in not only draft position but also free agents. Anyone they choose to add to their team, I think they're clearly looking at that whole athletic profile. Any running back the Bears potentially say, let's pick with the number 88 overall pick in the third round with that they have. 4.51 40-yard minimum and a 7.223 3 cone. So straight line speed and agility. Obviously, a running back needs both. My favorite prospect that I'm going to push this narrative, I'm going to push a lot of propaganda for him, and I hope he absolutely kills it at the combine, is Justice Hill. I really appreciate his dynamic running style. He wasn't ever a guy at Oklahoma State that was the prototypical bell cow that's going to touch the ball 25 times, which is fine. He doesn't have to be that in Chicago. He's going to be a guy that gets 10 to 15 touches a game, that can catch 4 or 5 passes, and is also very reliable as a runner. He's got a little bit of more beef to him, 190 pounds, probably could stand to bulk up, but I think he's an absolutely perfect fit in Matt Nagy's offense. And I would be shocked if he doesn't hit the Bears' thresholds. Is there anyone in particular that you might prefer, Brad?
Very interesting. I haven't heard that one, and I think that's a good call. Yeah, there's two guys at running back that have piqued my interest. Full disclosure, I follow college as much as I can. I'm more of an NFL guy, so when I'm on Twitter looking at all the draft nicks and everyone they love, I kind of just go off of what they say, and I kind of trust them, to be the gospel. So Darrell Henderson from Memphis and Devin Singletary from FAU are two guys that it just seems to me what these guys preach about them is, like you mentioned, not only do they have those measurables, they're both pretty fast, but also have that great agility, that side to side, but great pass catchers, most importantly. And we know Matt Nagy and a Matt Nagy offense, if you're a running back, you need to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. So those two guys really stand out to me.
It'll be difficult for the Bears to miss on a running back, considering that the position for one doesn't matter. I know you believe that, but it'll be difficult considering guys also that used to go on the first day or even in the second round drop to the third. If Ryan Pace can't find a versatile guy that fits Nagy's attack, I'm going to probably criticize him. I'm going to probably blow a gasket and start another Fire Pace hashtag that is totally serious and not at all sarcastic. That some people took way too seriously a few weeks back. I don't know why that's coming to mind now, but I'm just saying. Moving on to defensive back. So I just forwarded along the thresholds for you. I don't know if you're taking a look at that, Brad, but I didn't separate when I was doing this last year. I didn't go from cornerback to nickel cornerback to safety. I put in my mind that the Bears looked underpaced through 4 free agencies and 3 drafts. They kind of more or less put every defensive back they've drafted or signed over the years under one category. They didn't really delineate by position. So I put it under one umbrella. So the thresholds for DBs, 5'11", 4.50 40, 6.933 cone. The only guys that have ever hit that under pace, Antrell Roll, Sherrod Martin, I know who, Omar Bolden, who, B.W. Webb, who, Prince Amukamara, Kyle Fuller, Alan Ball. Everyone else, so I've color-coded it. Everyone else was missing something, had incomplete testing, or didn't hit that threshold. Every other corner, that's Amos, that's Callahan, that's Tracy Porter. And it's interesting that actually Amos and Callahan fall under this section where they don't have the thresholds, and it's mostly because their 3 cones are kind of pretty bad. They don't have the same change of agility. The one guy that is the lone exception to this entire thing in Pace's drafting is obviously Eddie Jackson, who had a broken leg and didn't test at the combine. And lo and behold, he's a first-team All-Pro now. So that's one of those things where athletic thresholds don't always go your way. Brad, who is a DB, so it could be a nickel back and be a safety that you particularly like, that you're anxious to see how he tests at the Underwear Olympics?
Sure. So I'm looking at your chart now, which is very cool, by the way. Thank you for sending this over. And maybe we should throw this in a link or something like that with the podcast. One guy that I think he played safety in college at Miami, Jaquan Johnson. But I've seen other people out there in the Twitter sphere believe that he could probably play slot or safety. And that's kind of why I like him. So one interesting thing about Ryan Pace, talking about him really quickly, I mean, the guy has taken a lot of safeties in the NFL draft so far. We had Deion Bush, DeAndre Hall in the same round in the same draft. He obviously took Amos in the 5th. Those guys went in the 4th. Again, Eddie was in the 4th, but as many people in revisionist history now say they had him mocked in their 23rd overall pick if it weren't for his broken leg, yada yada. But yes. Jaquan Johnson out of Miami would be my answer to your question.
I like Jaquan Johnson. My answers, and I'm really happy you didn't say it because I was afraid you'd say it, because I feel like he's getting too popular for my taste, to where the Bears won't be able to get him without a patented Pace trade up. Amani Hooker. I think Iowa has been churning out a lot of great DBs lately. Most recent Desmond King, who became a Pro Bowler with the Chargers, and I think Hooker is the next guy that fits that mold. He's very versatile. In college he was more of a safety, but I think you can find a way to you can find a way to really play him anywhere. I think I think he'd excel in the box. I think he's good enough in coverage and good enough in flipping his hips and working backwards to where I think he could, like you were saying that you think Pace should be looking for day one starters. I think Hooker would be a day one starter, especially next having the luxury of Eddie Jackson being able to cover him. And I think Hooker, arguably in my mind, would be able to have the range to where Jackson doesn't have to necessarily do as much, and Jackson can be more free flowing than he already is. Hooker's a very polished safety and a very polished player, and I'm really hate that he's getting so popular because that means that teams are almost for certain looking at him in the second round now, and maybe putting him completely out of the Bears price range. Please stop talking about him. This is the only time I'm going to mention him.
I was going to say you're contributing to your own demise.
He's just he wasn't okay. 65 tackles as a junior last year, 4 picks, has the ball skills. A guy that had the pedigree and the leader of a very physical secondary, of a very underrated secondary. Like, what is there not to like about this guy? This guy, to me, he fits the mold of someone like Chuck Pagano, a secondary guru, a DB guru, where he'd coach him up immediately and he'd be a star level contributor right away. I really think he's that kind of option. I think you were saying how Pace waited off until the third and fourth round. Like, he's one of those sleepers. If the Bears don't get him, he's going to be a great sleeper for someone else. So just keep an eye on that name, and see where he tests. I probably already ruined it, so we'll see how it develops.
Yeah, it does seem like, from what I've seen, like it's a pretty deep safety class. You're hearing about a guy out of Delaware, Nasser Adderley. People think he's going to go in the second round. So, like you said, one of these guys is going to fall. So, hopefully that's your guy, Manny, out of Iowa. So we'll see.
All right, Brad. And then the last position, I didn't have this as far as athletic thresholds. Obviously, how can you put an athletic threshold for kicker? But with the news of Robbie Gould likely being franchise tagged, and that sound you hear is the screams of a million Bears fans screaming in terror, and then all of a sudden it's gone. That's the sound you hear. What are their options? Should they perhaps be looking at guys UDFAs that might be potentially talking to guys in Indianapolis that they could sign to that? Should they maybe go after Matt Bryant? Should they look at someone like Andy Phillips, who didn't make it through their 2017 camp, but maybe has caught on now? This will be more tricky, obviously.
No, surprisingly, actually, I've been running kicker analytics for months now, so I'm not really sure what you're talking about. No. So, funnily enough, I do want to point out, you mentioned Andy Phillips. I'm not sure if you saw, but on Twitter, he posted a video of him kicking like a 50-something yarder in the snow, and the hashtag was "You can't ice this." I don't think it was a shot at Cody Parkey, but I also think it may have been a shot at Cody Parkey, which I loved. But anyways, I actually have a legitimate answer, and I think that with the I actually think that with the Bears getting that second, 7th round pick, with the conditions, being qualified by DeAndre Hall and the Eagles, I actually do think they could draft one in the 7th. And I think they should take Cole Tracy out of LSU. I have seen, I lived down in New Orleans. The kid is nails. Like you said, I actually don't know anything about kicking. I'm kidding. But the kid made a lot of big kicks in a lot of big games. I know he's one of the few guys who's getting talked about as a potential drafted guy. He might just be a UDFA, but if they feel like they had a good draft, they're in the 7th and he's still there, I say go for it.
But isn't the history of most successful kickers in the league that of guys that probably a Phillips mold where they they kind of have to work their way up. They get a tryout, like they a random tryout in the off season, the random summer tryout, and then work their way up. Like it's probably just mere coincidence, really. I mean, that it happened just because it happens so often doesn't mean that that's necessarily the path to success with the kicker. But history suggests that a UDFA, I mean, even Robbie Gould, UDFA for the Bears, guy they found off the street quite literally, and gave him an opportunity. Isn't that doesn't that strategy behoove them more?
It certainly does. I mean, are you suggesting Roberto Aguayo was a bad second-round pick? Because I can't believe you're saying that.
I,
No, yeah, I mean, it definitely does. Like I said, if they didn't have a second, seventh round pick, I would say don't even look at it. It's not, you make fun of me for saying running backs don't matter. They don't. Kickers definitely matter in big moments, but
but they should.
they shouldn't be
They
draft
shouldn't
capital.
matter. They also shouldn't matter. That's what I say. But
Yeah, no, you want the AAF rules, 2-point conversion only, Madden style, which
yeah,
I can get behind. I can get behind that.
funny that you mentioned Roberto Aguayo. I don't think I've ever said this story, and it's not really that notable of a story. But like at 2017 camp, I remember he had this verbal crutch or this verbal tick, whatever you want to call it. It was the day they brought him in. It was like when Connor Barth was struggling, I think. So it was a few days after they cut Andy Phillips, and they brought Aguayo in, and it was the beginning of that whole redemption like narrative that he might get. Oh, this is going to the chance he's going to get or confidence. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. I can't say I do.
Okay, well, he got cut by the Bucks, and then the Bears were giving him that chance, right? And he gets into camp, and he's at the podium, and he just had the most, quite literally, of anyone I've ever spoken to in my life, Brad, had the most notable verbal crutch. I think he said at the end of the day, when talking about his career, talking about himself, at least 30 times over the course of 5 minutes.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, I'm just gonna keep plugging away. At the end of the day, the Bears gave me a chance. I'm gonna kick away. And at the end of the day, and I'm sitting there in the front row, huh? So what about at the start of the day? What about what do you do when you wake up? What do you do when you wake up? You triggered a synapse there, so I had to say that. But
I mean, I think you're getting at. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're getting at I think a key part of this is that kicking game is more mental than it is physical. These guys, once you're at this level, we get it. You can kick a ball 50 yards, and you can, from the right hash and left hash. It's more of a mental game, and you can't really measure that, especially not in Indianapolis at the combine. So I don't know, but that's why the only guy I like and the only guy I know is a guy that I've seen hit some, kicks in 100,000 person SEC stadiums. That's the only reason I said Cole Tracy.
Yeah, that's definitely why I mentioned Roberto Aguayo's verbal tick to a segue that it's mental. Yeah, thanks, Brad, for sure.
Nice.
That was definitely the point I was trying to make.
Toss it up for me.
Let's I was going to try to do something a little bit more fun because I was seeing this. It is the off season, so I'm gonna manufacture a story, not necessarily a story out of nothing, but a conversation out of nothing. And it was Brad, who are your top 5 active players in the NFL? And let's use this definition. Not only do they have to be a transcendent star, but when you think of them not with their current teams, that team is obviously at a tremendous loss. It's like they lift whatever respective unit they play on so much that it's like, okay, holy shit, like they're that offense or that defense they're in trouble now, and try not to pick 5 quarterbacks. I think it's obvious caveat, like it'd be very easy to pick 5 quarterbacks. I think this is obvious. This is the Deli Nation where you go between some defensive guys, like individual talent, and lifting everyone else. So your top 5 players.
Yeah, sure. I think that you could probably ask me this any day of the week, and I might have a different answer. That's just me prefacing so that I don't get roasted for this. But without, I would say, okay, Aaron Donald, easy. Khalil Mack, easy. Let's get those two off the board. I think you got to put Patrick Mahomes on there. Yes, it was only one season, but the cap nerd in me is looking at like value as well as just how good they are at football. And then I think that Bears fans, I apologize. Aaron Rodgers has to be on the list if we're being honest. And then number 5, I guess I would say Von Miller's in the conversation. Yeah, let's go with Von Miller. That's my 5.
You put 3 pass rushers in the top
Well,
5.
one's an edge. Two are edge rushers. One is an interior defensive lineman. So
I feel like this is the kind of thing where it's obvious that it's very much recency bias. It's very much because like guys like Jalen Ramsey after last year, I think you could have made an argument for top 5.
Yeah,
and I still personally, I wouldn't put him in the top 5 now, but I still personally think he's the best cornerback since Deion Sanders. That might be a little hyperbolic, but I really believe that. And that I don't think Ramsey necessarily fell out of the top 10 in terms of individual talent just because the Jaguars were overall bad. But I think overall your 5 is pretty sound. My only thing is like I don't know if Von Miller's necessarily top 5. I think Khalil Mack is obvious belongs. I think Khalil Mack it's obvious what he does for the Bears defense. It's obvious what Aaron Donald does for the Rams defense. I mean, Aaron Donald might be the best interior pass rusher of all time. Patrick Mahomes is Aaron Rodgers at 23 years old, which wasn't a thing for Aaron Rodgers. And he's bigger and he's stronger and he's more athletic, which is crazy to think about. I guess what I'm getting at is who are guys that could make arguments for maybe budging in there. This is a very Madden-like discussion, but like for me, like I don't know, Julio Jones maybe, NFL receiving leader. Guy like Eddie Jackson, maybe not top 5, but getting his way in the top 15, top 20, top 10. Like he's a first-team All-Pro guy that scores touchdowns at an uncanny pace for a defensive back. You have the case for a lot of guys.
Yeah, no, I first want to say Jalen Ramsey is a great call. And I've been having this conversation a lot about there's this big belief. There's 2 sides of belief. There's one that a great pass rush can make all your secondary players look better. And there's kind of the flip side where it's like a great secondary can kind of be great in coverage and fill those holes and give your defensive line enough time to put on pressure. And there's kind of this great debate of, which actually feeds which and which is more important. And a lot of guys point to the fact that Bill Belichick never really pays pass rushers, but, went out and got Stephon Gilmore, made him the highest paid corner or one of the highest paid corners in the league. So, okay, I think Jalen Ramsey 100% on there. If we're gonna go, my problem is I'm looking at positional value too. So
that's fair.
So I want to put offensive linemen, like I'd want to put like a Tyron Smith, but it's like the whole Dallas Cowboys offensive line is good. So how much of it is just Tyron Smith? I think he's in the conversation. I think one of Kuechly or Bobby Wagner. Again, middle linebacker is not the most important position, but those guys are transcendent players. So I think you throw those guys in the mix. There's obviously other quarterbacks and edge rushers. I'll just make a hot take. I think if you had to pick a running back, I think Zeke is a game-changing player. And then you mentioned Julio. I like my receivers to score touchdowns. So I would.
That's not his fault.
It's not.
That's not his fault. He doesn't get red zone targets.
No, it's not. Actually, I can. Well, I'm not going to pull the numbers up, but it's false. It's fake news that he doesn't get red zone targets. He does, and he doesn't make the most of them. He doesn't get like.
I hate you. Brandon, I hate you so much.
So like, I mean, he's controversial as can be, but I still think Odell Beckham is probably the best receiver in the NFL. When healthy, of course.
What?
Yeah, I do.
I am angry at a sports argument. Oh my God! Continue.
Well, once we see him get a ball thrown to him by an actual quarterback, we'll see. But that's not happening.
You have some respect for Eli Manning's corpse, sir.
Yes,
you have some respect.
2-time Super Bowl champion Eli Manning.
And his corpse.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like I'm down here in New Orleans. A guy like Michael Thomas could make a real argument again, it might be just position or
Once he plays with a real quarterback, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's the other side of the coin is he's the only receiving threat, for one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So maybe that has something to do with it as well. So I probably named a couple. Let me hear your list.
I'm just flabbergasted that you wouldn't say Antonio Brown. I was almost leading the conversation that way. Like, come on, man. Antonio Brown is the fastest to 10,000 yards receiving ever. Like, Antonio Brown, like, the Steelers are going to be all they're going to have this false sense of bravado. They're going to lean on their old-ass quarterback that they drafted in 2004 that throws everybody under the bus. And they're going to be flabbergasted to find, like, oh, hey, maybe Brown bailing us out with all these crazy catches that he made all these years. Maybe we actually needed that. Maybe we actually needed the guy that can get open at will against anyone he wants at any point in the game, in any situation. Maybe we're going to miss that. Like, Antonio Brown, to me, in terms of receiving impact, in terms of the receiver, I've never seen a guy lift an offense more than he does. He might have the diva distractions. He might have a little bit of an outspoken personality, but when you're such a superstar of his level, when you're such a transcendent player of his level, when you're such a productive player in his own right, like, you take those lumps. Like, to me, the Steelers offense, and you might disagree, they're going to experience a precipitous drop without him in the fold. I mean, you might be skeptical as to whether they trade him. I'm operating on the aspect that if they did make a move, like, you'll see why Antonio Brown is the kind of guy that would fit my criteria for a top 5 player because of it.
So no, I want to say you're 100% right. It was again the GM and me. If you look at my list, I don't think a single guy I said was over 27 years old. So, AB being 30 just took him out of consideration for me. So I viewed that question more as if you had to start a franchise today, who would you take to start your franchise today? So,
that's fair.
But I completely agree with you 100%. That offense is going to fall off. The Steelers, we talked about this in our chat, but the irony, the sweet irony of the fact that they, restructured Antonio Brown's contract and converted salary money and a roster bonus into a signing bonus, which added more dead money for now. They did that to create room for Le'Veon Bell last year. Lol. It's a pretty disastrous situation. The only reason I said he wasn't going to get traded, it was again because the 21 million dead money is insane. But I think the Steelers, if he threatens this to not play, they already went down that road last year, and the guy held true to his word and didn't play. So I guess if there was any NFL team that would be willing to trade away a guy and take on 21 million in dead money, I guess it would be the Steelers.
What about Todd Gurley, Brad? No love for Todd Gurley. I thought you loved running backs.
CJ Anderson, top 10 player. I agree.
You're listening to the Blitz Network Radio. Robert Zaglinski here with my main cap analyst here at TBN, Brad Spielberger. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Follow him on Twitter at BradOTC. He also contributes to Over the Cap. Brad, let's finish this up with some juicy Machado and Zion takes, some depressing notes. Sometimes we and I want to set this up properly. We watch sports to be entertained. We watch sports to see greatness, right? And sometimes teams don't want to pay for greatness. And sometimes my special son, so I was going to adopt Zion. He was going to be like Leonard for me. Nike lets them down because you have to look at the brand, right? I feel very bad for White Sox fans that Manny Machado, for anyone that is a TBN subscriber, TBN listener, you guys have my sympathies. This for one of our fair staff members here at TBN. I know he's taking it very hard. He's in our thoughts and prayers. He's in our thoughts and prayers. And the same goes for Zion, who went down tonight against in the game against North Carolina because he burst out of his shoe because he's such a freak of nature. And let's hope that that's all right. but yeah, like for that staff member that shall go unnamed, anyone that can put two and two together knows who it is. Like thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers.
So I originally came on the pod, as I told you, and I thought that the unnamed staff member was going to be here as a third person. You know, Robert, that I'm a sucker for a bad pun.
Mm-hmm.
They're my favorite. And so I was going to open the conversation, maybe not even while we were recording, but I was going to do something along the lines of like, wow, there is so much to talk about, and just kind of roll it right in there. And I was so excited to do that that when you told me he wasn't on, I almost just walked off the podcast. Um, but you know, I told the joke still, so it's still and it landed. I know it landed.
Mm.
As for Zion, I'm actually like, all jokes aside, I'm like depressed about it. I hope he's okay. Um, I mean, your tweet was spot on. Yeah, they're talking about $2,600 tickets to this game. We're talking about, you know, a kid who, you know, is 18 years old, entire future ahead of him, and he's, you know, playing for nothing. I hope he's fine. It didn't look good. Yeah, the shoe exploded, which almost may have helped because I think it was more give than if the shoe stuck. But that right knee definitely got tweaked. I hope he's okay.
Who will think of the multi-billion-dollar brand, Brad? Nike.
I
Oh
know.
my God, it doesn't look good for them. Like, they're going to go out of business now because their shoe exploded on a college basketball a nationally televised college basketball game. Who will think of the multi-billion-dollar brand, Brad? Who?
No, you're right. You're right. And also, I saw so that one was awful. I think maybe even worse was, you know, some people paid, you know, $3,000 to be at this game, and they paid to see Zion Williamson, and now he's been out after a minute. All right. Well, here's my thing. If you are the person that can afford to fly to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and pay $3,000 to go to a basketball game, I don't care about your experience. I don't. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Your life's pretty good.
Your life's pretty good. Like you're probably going to be able to pay for the next college superstar and fly out to wherever his game is and go watch it. And no, I sincerely hope for you that next time they don't get injured and lose their dream within 30 seconds at your inconvenience. Twitter, man, Twitter.
Twitter.
We all hate it, and I'm not gonna say love because we all hate it. We all hate it. I also had this as something just to finish up with. I'm not sure about your cinema takes. Knowing how you can't operate Excel properly, you probably have awful movie opinions. Like let's be real, Brad.
Wow.
But
I don't even see the correlation, but continue.
It fits perfectly. Okay, so who in your mind should win Best Picture?
Okay, so
if you have someone for the Oscars, that is, of course, I'm talking about.
Sure. So in full disclosure, I don't think I've seen any of the movies for Best Picture. I know.
Did you see Black Panther?
Oh, of course, Black Panther was phenomenal.
Then you saw something that is nominated for Best Picture.
Okay, so Black Panther could definitely be in the conversation. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see the movie about Freddie Mercury, and just off of what I've heard in the streets, that's my pick.
Wait, what do you say you've heard in the streets? The streets of Twitter, the streets of the internet?
Is that the Freddie Mercury biopic with the guy from that TV show that I don't know, that weird TV show. Rami Malek is the actor's name.
From like iRobot or something. Or
that's the movie. I think the TV version of that movie. Yes, we're on the same page.
Okay.
No, yeah, I'm kidding. It's
not Mr. Robot.
Yes,
there it is.
Yes. Yeah, that movie. I want to see it because I'm a huge Queen guy. And I think it's gonna win because Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga just don't do it for me.
I don't know. For me, like I'm not a huge fan of the biopic. Like to me, it absolutely has to be something that just wows you away. Like I more prefer original storytelling, something that someone was able to write up and manifest on their own. And, you know, that's the entire every nominee for 2019 almost fits that mold. Vice about Dick Cheney, like, oh, cool. Christian Bale can put on 50 pounds and play a fat guy that once shot one of his aides. in a field. Bohemian
Allegedly.
Rhapsody. It's true though. Okay, Dick Cheney
I
did
know, I
do
know.
that.
I'm just kidding.
Bohemian Rhapsody and Freddie Mercury. Like, isn't a Star is Born after about
It's a
someone
remake.
too?
It's a
Oh,
remake.
so it's not
Yeah,
even an original idea, and that might
you're
win
right.
Best Picture. Like for me, like I actually saw. So I could buy Black Panther, but I also actually saw Black Klansman. So that Jordan Peele had a hand in that, and Spike Lee had a hand in that. I thought that was very good. I don't know if it was particularly too like so impactful that it should be the name the best movie of 2018, but I really enjoyed it. I guess where I'm taking this conversation is so I saw recently that Black Panther might be like the dark horse to win, and that certainly would be a great achievement for Ryan Coogler and company. As you know, that's it's a very culturally impactful movie. But can it be best picture if it wasn't even the best Marvel movie of last year? And obviously the best being Infinity War. And I think and I'm going to assume that you also thought Infinity War is the best. If not, that entire conversation just goes out the window. But I'm just saying.
And no, and so Infinity War was an incredible movie. Black Panther I also thought was an amazing, amazing movie, and I think the one piece you touched on was just the cultural impact, and it can't be understated, how important Black Panther the movie was. And I also, I guess, if we're gonna get sentimental as well, R.I.P. to the legend Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm.
That could add a little bit of spice to the mix as well. Maybe a tribute to him. Kind of give him. I mean, obviously, they don't pick stuff based on stuff like that, but I'm a big conspiracy theorist when it comes to stuff like that. So, that's another angle as well.
Yeah, I guess. Well, then best picture, it's kind of like almost how we would define MVP in sports. It's not necessarily always the best quote unquote player, best quote unquote movie or piece of art form. Like it's what was individually most impactful or most individually had the best story or the best construct. Like Infinity War to me is a superior movie, but I think history is going to be fonder of Black Panther. It's going to look back on Black Panther as more of a a landmark, yeah, more of a landmark in culture and how everything was seen movie wise. Um,
Yeah,
like LeBron James, like just to use that sports argument, like LeBron James could realistically win MVP every year, but he doesn't because
right.
sometimes guys like James Harden score 35 points a game. Bill Belichick could be coach of the year every year because he's the best coach
Yeah,
in the NFL. But that's a narrative thing. Like it's where the guy that gets someone to turn to a fast turnaround after sucking the previous year, like that this year that was Matt Nagy. So. Black Panther might be technically inferior to Infinity War, and it is in my mind, but uh, its art form is gonna stick out, and maybe that's what lifts it over. And I think that would be really cool if it did win out.
yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think that it's a pivotal movie. Honestly, in its most basic form. I mean, Hollywood historically has had the view that movies catered towards black viewership wouldn't do well at the box office, and
Right.
Black Panther proved that to be the stupidest and most incorrect opinion of all time. So, and and then you have, I think Get Out was in the same year if I'm mistaken, but it kind of
I think
was
Get Out was the year before,
year before. Okay, so
2017.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So we're it's they're the first cornerstones that are changing the future of Hollywood. So yeah, I definitely am with you. And I guess I'll just throw this in there because you touched on it. Um, Stuff like that is important in all voting aspects. Where it's the different. LeBron. I'm not even a LeBron guy, but he probably should win MVP every single season. Bill Belichick absolutely should be coach of the year every season. I am a big Bill Belichick guy. And I just wanted to throw this in there. This is random, but for the next pod we do, I'm the biggest Russell Westbrook hater on planet Earth. I'm just gonna put that out there.
I don't disagree. Like I don't really like him either, Brad. You're not gonna. That's not gonna incite a reaction.
Ah, I tried.
I think he might have more of an argument with our unnamed staff member if he's on next time. But
Okay, okay.
with me that's totally fine. At any rate, my friend, that should just about wrap up this pod. We gave out our thoughts and prayers to White Sox fans for Manny Machado. They are genuine for everybody, but our unnamed staff member, he knows who he is. And prayers and thoughts up for Zion, also genuine. As always, subscribers, and as always, my fair listeners, I appreciate you guys giving us a chance, taking a look at our content. Make sure you check out Brad's piece on guys that the Bears could pursue as depth and as free agents and other targets that he did today. Take a look at Kari's Roquan Smith piece. We are trying to sorry, bit of a cough. We are trying to hit every angle and story you might not be considering. It's that quiet part of the off season, and when we are squeezing out the parts that we think are still actually meaningful and most meaningful for you to consider. And without any of your support, I don't think we really could do most of this, if any of it. So thank you, and obviously the draft season's here in earnest, and only more is to come. Brad, very short notice jumping on tonight, though, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I reflect all those sentiments. Thank you, listeners and readers. We really appreciate you.
This has been the Blitz Network Radio. The NFL Scouting Combine starts next week. We are a little bit over, I think, a little less than 3 weeks actually from free agency. The busiest part of the offseason is almost underway, and we're going to have everything for you. We're going to have everything about it for you at TBN. Follow us on Twitter at the Blitznet. Follow Brad on Twitter at BradOTC, and follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. And as always, everybody, stay classy.